Because I'm old and most of you are not, what I'm about to say probably will be hard for you to believe. But those of you who are my age and older and maybe a little younger, you will understand exactly what I mean. I honestly have a hard time saying the name Billy Wilson. I don't know of another name that I've ever known in Franklin County or otherwise that in my own heart drew such high respect, high regard because of what and who he was. It's hard to imagine that it's now been almost 60 years ago, 57, I believe. Yeah, 57 years ago, this past July, that I was standing just outside the kitchen of our home in Meadville, and my father told me that Billy Wilson had been killed. I really didn't believe that was possible because you couldn't imagine that anything existed that could take such a strong life. Billy Wilson was he was amazing in a lot of ways. He wasn't perfect. None of us are. And he wasn't a mythical figure, but he was, put in the words of my friend Ken McLemore and his fellow ball player, arguably the meanest, toughest, most talented athlete to pass through Franklin High School during my time there. Ken went on to say his life of promise was snuffed out late one July night in 1966 on Highway 51 near Beauregard, Mississippi, in a horrible high-speed car crash, which also took the life of another legendary Franklin County athlete, Johnny Malone. I grew up, part of my growing up years, Billy and his family lived about 100 feet from me. And I was recently trying to explain the old school building that existed on that street that ran between my family's house and Dr. Jack Hollingsworth's house that ended or dead ended at Miss Marguerite King's house. And on that street on the left side was this old Meadville Agricultural High School. I believe it was like a dormitory, but it was made into apartments or homes, so to speak. And Mr. Brian Wilson, Miss Dorothy Wilson, and their children, Melba and Billy and Judy, lived there. I don't recall exactly how long, but for a good while. And I was trying to explain that I had visited there pretty frequently. And I think the way I put it, truthfully, was that I worried the horns off of them every day going up there. To say Billy was my hero was an understatement. But let me tell you, he commanded respect even as a very young man. The picture that I've attached to this is sixth grade. And his looks didn't really change from then for the rest of his life. His hair looked pretty much the same. He grew stronger and bigger, but his outward appearance was the same. If you talk, at least the girls I've talked to that were around Billy, that maybe went out with him, they said that he was extremely well-mannered. My friend Bob Bryant tells stories about things that if when you were around Billy, he just kind of, he said, this is what we're going to do, and that was what we were going to do. back to Ken. He said that he had all the tools necessary to play at the highest level. And there's no doubt he would have played college football and, yes, even the NFL. Ken McLemore said Billy was known to utilize his forearms when blocking, tackling, or running the ball. Coach Hickman realized Billy's potential during his sophomore year and began to groom Billy for the fullback position that spring. Because of his sheer strength and grit, it was almost impossible to tackle him. If you hit him low, you took a knee to the head, and if you went high, you were introduced to his almost lethal forearm. Ask any of his teammates who went up against him in drills. He punished you. He would run over you and grind his cleats into your flesh as he did. About the only area of weakness that he may have had, if you want to call it that, was to be tackled from behind. But if you know anything about football, you know that's not the most efficient way of stopping a ball carrier. Ken said, I would have loved to watch Billy play out his career at Franklin High School, but alas, that was not to be. I know that to Billy's family, Mr. Brian and Miss Dorothy and Melba and Judy, this was more than a devastating loss. Without taking anything away from all of them who are great people, each one of them in their own right, Billy was sort of the centerpiece of that family, if at least that's the way it looked from the outside. And I know that they maintained a memorial to him in their home for as long as I knew. And I'm sure that still is in the possession of either Melba or Judy, the only ones that are still with us at this point in time. But the stories about Billy Wilson and the things that he did in terms of his strength and his dominance among people are truly legendary. When I tell you that it's hard for me to say his name, I'm just telling you that I don't know what makes one person a lot tougher than other people, but Billy Wilson was one of those. And the reason it's so hard to say his name, of course, his memory evokes strong feelings, but I just don't. I don't feel worthy to say his name because he was that much more in terms of his physical manhood and otherwise than the rest of us mere humans. Now, I think it's impossible to overstate, but I might be coming close to that. But to say that he was an icon is to issue a statement that doesn't even need to be said. It's obvious on the face of it. If you were alive and in school in Franklin County or lived in Franklin County during the 1960s and well into the 70s, because his memory didn't fade quickly, and it hadn't yet today. In fact, his picture is on his tombstone at Midway Cemetery, and if you go there, you'll see Billy Wilson's picture on his tombstone. That was the first one of those I ever saw. But his persona, the place in which he was held with respect, in really every sense of the word, has not dimmed at all with age in my own heart. I almost would like to get somebody else to tell this story, and I haven't even scratched the surface of the story. Billy Wilson, the legend is great, but the man was greater.